The rain beat down on the windshield of my Ford pickup as I pulled into the driveway of our suburban Atlanta home, a two-story craftsman we'd spent 16 years turning into a sanctuary. It was October 12th, our anniversary, and I'd left the office early, a bottle of Napa Valley Cabernet tucked under my arm, a silver bracelet engraved with "Forever Yours" hidden in my jacket pocket. I'd spent months saving for it, picturing the way Emily's hazel eyes would light up, the same way they had when I proposed under the Georgia pines all those years ago. The house was dark, the porch light off, which struck me as odd. Emily always left it on when she knew I'd be late. I figured she might be napping, maybe planning her own surprise. The kids, Lila, 15, and Ben, 13, were at a school dance, giving us a rare night alone. I grinned to myself, imagining her in that red dress she wore for special occasions, the one that still made my heart skip. I slipped inside, the hardwood creaking under my boots, and set the wine on the kitchen counter. The silence felt heavy, unnatural, like the air before a storm breaks. Then I heard it, a low chuckle, rough and unfamiliar, drifting down from upstairs. My stomach twisted, but I told myself it was the TV, maybe a movie she'd fallen asleep. Then came her voice, Emily's voice, soft and teasing, the tone she used to whisper to me in the dark. "You're better than I expected," she said, and the words hit me like a punch to the gut. My legs moved on autopilot, carrying me up the stairs I'd climbed 1,000 times, each step louder than the last, my breath shallow and ragged. The bedroom door was cracked open, a sliver of light spilling into the hall. I pushed it wider and the world stopped. There she was, my wife of 16 years, tangled in our sheets, her bare skin pressed against a man I'd never seen before. He was broad-shouldered, maybe 30, with a smug grin that faltered when he saw me. Emily turned, her hazel eyes locking onto mine, and I waited for the shock, the guilt, anything to show she cared. Instead, she rolled her eyes, exasperated, like I'd interrupted her favorite show. "Mark, what the hell are you doing here?" she snapped, pulling the sheet up as if it could hide the betrayal. "It's our anniversary," I croaked, the bracelet burning a hole in my pocket, the wine bottle slipping from my hand to shatter on the floor, red liquid pooling like blood. The guy scrambled for his jeans, muttering something I didn't catch. But Emily just waved him off. "Mark, just go," she said, her voice flat, impatient. "Give us an hour to finish up, then we'll talk, okay?" Finish up. The words echoed in my skull, sharp and cold, slicing through 16 years of memories, our first dance at the county fair, the late nights rocking Lila to sleep, the way she'd kissed me after Ben was born, promising we'd always be a team. I stared at her, searching for the woman I'd loved, but all I saw was a stranger, annoyed by my presence in my own damn house. "How could you?" I whispered, my voice breaking, the air thick with the stench of her perfume and his sweat. She didn't answer, just sighed again, and that silence was the final blow. I turned, stumbling down the stairs, the broken glass crunching under my boots, and walked out into the rain, leaving everything I'd known behind. The rain soaked through my jacket as I climbed into the truck, my hands trembling so badly I could barely turn the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, a guttural sound that matched the chaos tearing through my chest. Emily's words, "Give. Here's an hour to finish up," looped in my head like a broken record, each repetition twisting the knife deeper. 16 years of marriage, 2 kids, a mortgage paid off with sweat and overtime, all shattered in a single moment under the sheets I'd bought for our 10th anniversary. I didn't know where I was going, just that I had to get out of that house, out of that life, out of the lie I'd been living. The streets of Atlanta blurred past, headlights reflecting off wet asphalt, horns blaring as I swerved through traffic, a man unmoored, a ghost driving into the night. I pulled into the parking lot of a rundown motel off I-85, the neon sign buzzing. Vacancy in sickly green letters. The clerk barely looked up as I slapped cash on the counter. $60 for a night, no questions asked. Room 19 smelled of mildew and stale cigarettes, the mattress sagging under my weight as I sat, staring at the peeling wallpaper. My phone buzzed. Emily texting, "Where are you? It's not what you think." Not what I think. I'd seen her, naked with another man in our bed, her voice dripping with irritation at my interruption. I turned the phone off, tossed it onto the nightstand and let the silence swallow me. The bracelet was still in my pocket, its weight a cruel reminder of the fool I'd been. I pulled it out, ran my thumb over the engraving, "Forever yours," and hurled it against the wall where it clattered into the shadows. 16 years flashed before me like a movie reel I couldn't stop. Our wedding at the little Baptist church in Decatur, Emily in a lace gown, promising me forever under a stained-glass Jesus. Lila's birth, her tiny hand gripping my finger in the hospital room, Emily whispering, "We did it, Mark." Ben's first steps in the backyard, both of us cheering as he toddled into my arms. Family vacations to Tybee Island, barbecues with neighbors, quiet nights on the couch watching reruns of Friends. I'd thought we were solid, a team against the world. But there'd been cracks. Her late nights at the gallery, calls she'd take on the porch with hushed tones, the way she'd started locking her phone. I'd ignored it all, too damn trusting, too afraid to rock the boat. Now the boat wasn't. Just rocked, it was sunk, and I was drowning. I grabbed a notepad from the motel drawer, the kind with a faded logo and a stubby pencil, and started writing. Assets, the house, hers now. The truck, mine. Savings, split it. 401k, protect, it. Items, my tools, my dad's old shotgun, the leather jacket from our honeymoon. The kids, I stopped, pencil hovering. Lila and Ben didn't even know yet. What would she tell them? That Daddy walked out? That he couldn't handle Mommy's friends? My chest tightened, a sob clawing its way up my throat, but I swallowed it down. I wasn't crying for her. Not anymore. This was fury, pure and blazing, a fire I hadn't known I could feel. I tore the page out, stuffed it in my wallet, and made a vow. She wouldn't get a dime more than she deserved, and I'd never set foot in that house again. By 3 a.m., I'd found a divorce lawyer online, some guy named Rick with a 5-star rating and a promise of no-nonsense representation. I left a voicemail, my voice steady despite the storm inside. My wife. Cheated, I need out, call me. Then I called a moving company, offered double pay in cash if they'd meet me at dawn. I'd take what was mine before she could blink, before she could spin her lies to the world. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with humidity, pressing against the motel window. I lay back on the creaky bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, and felt something shift, a cold, hard resolve settling into my bones. Emily thought I'd come crawling back, that I'd stay quiet and take it. She was wrong. I was done being her doormat, done being the fool. This was war, and I was ready to fight. The dawn broke grey and heavy over Atlanta as I stood in the driveway of what used to be my home, directing movers like a general on a battlefield. They hauled out my workbench, my dad's shotgun, boxes of clothes I'd worn through years of family barbecues, everything I could claim as mine in the 2 hours before Emily returned from her morning run. I'd timed it perfectly, knowing her routine like the back of my hand, a bitter irony after 16 years. The house loomed behind me, its red brick facade mocking me with memories of Lila's finger paintings on the fridge, Ben's muddy cleats. By the door, I didn't look back as the last box was loaded into the truck, just handed the foreman a wad of cash and drove to a storage unit on the edge of town, locking away my old life behind a rusted metal door. Back at the motel, my phone lit up with Emily's calls, 10, 20, 30 missed notifications, her texts shifting from "Where's my stuff?" to "You can't do this to me." I ignored them all, focusing on the lawyer's email. Rick had filed the divorce papers, citing adultery, and requested full custody of Lila and Ben. I'd fought for them in my mind every sleepless night since. Walking out, picturing their faces, Lila's shy smile, Ben's goofy laugh. They were mine, damn it, and I wasn't letting her poison them with her lies. But Emily fought dirty. 2 weeks later, at the first mediation, she sat across from me in a crisp blazer, her hazel eyes cold as steel, spinning a tale of irreconcilable differences like I'd been the one screwing around. "Mark's unstable," she told the mediator, voice dripping with fake concern. "He abandoned us. The kids need stability. Me." The court gave her temporary custody while we battled it out, and she used every minute to turn them against me. 6 weeks dragged by before I got visitation. A supervised hour at a McDonald's off Peachtree Road. Lila sat picking at her fries, her dark hair hiding her face, while Ben scrolled his phone, earbuds in, shutting me out. "Hey guys," I said, forcing a smile, my voice thick with longing. "Missed you so much." Lila glanced up, her eyes, my eyes, flat and distant. "Mom says you left us," she muttered. Ben yanked an earbud out, his voice sharp. "She says you're freaking out over nothing. It's just sex, Dad. Grow up." The words hit like a freight train, knocking the air from my lungs. Just sex. My marriage, their family, torched for just sex? I gripped the table, fighting the urge to scream, to shake them and yell, "She cheated, she broke us." "Mum's boyfriend's cool," Ben added, smirking. "He took us to Six Flags. Where were you?" My hands shook as I pictured some slick asshole playing dad to my kids, riding roller coasters while I rotted in a motel. "I've been fighting for you," I said, low and raw, "every damn day since she—" Lila cut me off, her voice small but firm. "We don't need you, Dad. Mum's got it covered." It was a knife to the heart, twisted by the woman who'd birthed them, who'd fed them lies until they hated me. I stood, tossing cash on the table for uneaten food, my vision blurring. "If that's how you feel," I said, barely above a whisper, "then I'm done begging." I walked out, their voices calling Dad behind me, but I didn't turn back. The parking lot asphalt burned under my boots as I climbed into the truck, slamming the door so hard the window rattled. They'd chosen her, chosen the lie, and I was alone, a father erased by his own blood. The storage unit door clanged shut, and with it, I locked away Mark Taylor, husband, father, fool. I drove south, leaving Atlanta's skyline in the rearview, the city that held my past shrinking until it was just a smear of lights on the horizon. Charleston, South Carolina became my exile, a place where Spanish moss draped over oaks like funeral shrouds, and no one knew my name. I rented a one-bedroom apartment downtown, all white walls and cheap IKEA furniture, a blank slate for a man who'd lost everything. The divorce was finalized in a sterile courtroom 2 months later. Emily got the house, half the savings, and the kids. I got the truck, my tools, and a freedom I didn't know what to do with. I burned the papers in the apartment's tiny courtyard, watching the ashes spiral into the humid night. 16 years of vows turning to smoke. Work became my anchor. I'd been a mid-level manager at a logistics firm in Atlanta, but in Charleston, I took a job at a shipping company, crunching numbers in a cubicle with a view of the harbor. I showed up at 6 a.m., left at 8 p.m., burying myself in spreadsheets until my eyes blurred. Colleagues tried to crack my shell, invitations to beers. At the Blind Tiger, small talk about football, but I shut them down with a curt, "Not interested." They stopped asking, dubbing me the robot behind my back. I didn't care. The gym replaced the bar stool, my old dad bod melting away under weights and miles on the treadmill. Sweat became my therapy, each grunt pushing out the memory of Emily's voice, the kid's rejection. By 38, I was lean, hard, with gray creeping into my temples, less a man reborn, more a machine forged from betrayal. Nights were the hardest. The apartment's silence pressed in, heavy and accusing, so I'd sit on the balcony with a bourbon, staring at the Ravenel Bridge's lights cutting through the dark. I'd wonder about Lila and Ben. Were they happy? Did they miss me? I'd deleted their numbers, but their faces haunted me. Lila's braces-filled grin at her first dance recital, Ben's gap-toothed smile after scoring a goal. I'd failed them, or they'd failed me. I couldn't decide which hurt more. One night, drunk on Jim Beam and rage, I smashed a glass against the railing, shards raining onto the street below. A neighbor yelled, "Keep it down, asshole!" And I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. This was me now, a ghost in a city of strangers, a father without kids, a husband without a wife. I got a new phone, a new number, cutting the last thread to my old life. Emily's lawyer sent a final letter, child support demands, threats of contempt if I didn't pay. I wrote the check, mailed it with no return address, and vowed it'd be the last she'd get from me. At work, I climbed the ranks, my focus, earning me a corner office with a brass nameplate, Mark Taylor, operations lead. It was hollow, a title for a man who'd traded family for a paycheck. On my birthday, I stood alone in that office, 38 candles unlit in my mind, and realized I hadn't spoken to my parents in months. I called them, Mom's voice trembling through the line. "Where are you, Mark? What happened to my boy?" "He's gone, Mom," I said, flat and final. "This is who I am now." I hung up, poured another drink, and watched the harbor swallow the sunset. A man remade in solitude, steel where there'd once been flesh. 2 years into my Charleston exile, I'd perfected the art of invisibility. Clock in, crunch numbers, lift weights, repeat. My life was a grey routine, a treadmill set to nowhere, until Isabella Ortiz crashed through my walls like a hurricane, hitting the low country. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the shipping office humming with the usual chaos of invoices and deadlines, when she stormed into my corner office, all 5'3" of her radiating defiance. "Mark Taylor, we need to talk," she declared, hands on hips, her dark eyes blazing under a cascade of black curls. I looked up from my monitor, ready to freeze her out with the glare that sent interns running, but she didn't flinch. "Your attitude's a problem," she said, voice sharp as a switchblade. "My team's scared to bring you reports because you act like they're idiots." I should have fired back, told her to mind her own damn business, reminded her I was her boss's boss. Instead, something snapped loose inside me, a crack in the armor I'd welded shut. I laughed, a rough, unfamiliar sound that startled us, both. "You've got balls, Ortiz," I said, leaning back in my chair, studying her, those fierce eyes, the way her navy blazer hugged her frame. She blinked, thrown off, then narrowed her gaze. "This isn't funny. You're tanking morale." But the edge in her tone softened, and for the first time in years I felt seen. Not as the robot, not as the ghost, but as a man who'd forgotten how to be human. She was the logistics coordinator, 3 levels below me, a spitfire who'd clawed her way up from a temp gig with a mix of grit and charm. After that day, I couldn't unsee her. Her focus in meetings, the way she'd tease the warehouse guys into working faster, her laugh echoing down the hall like a melody I didn't know I'd missed. I started small, testing waters I'd forgotten how to swim in. A mourning instead of a grunt, holding her gaze in the elevator instead of staring at my shoes. One day she caught me off guard in the break room pouring coffee. "You're not as scary as they say," she teased, smirking over her mug. "Just takes the right person to call my bluff," I shot back, surprising myself with the ease of it. We talked about the Braves, her Cuban coffee obsession, nothing deep, but it was the first real conversation I'd had since Atlanta. Weeks later, over sandwiches at a deli near the Battery, she dropped her guard. "My ex-fiancé cheated," she said, staring at her untouched pastrami. "Caught him with my cousin, 6 weeks before the wedding. Thought I'd never trust again." Her voice trembled, but her eyes stayed dry, locked on mine, daring me to judge. I set my sandwich down, the weight of her words pulling my own out. "My wife, 16 years, walked in on her with some guy on our anniversary, told me to leave, so they could finish." Isabella's jaw tightened, a flicker of rage matching mine. "Bastards," she muttered, then reached across, her hand brushing mine. A spark, warm and fleeting, the first touch I hadn't flinched from in years. We weren't friends, not yet, but something shifted. Lunches became regular, conversations stretched longer. Her childhood in Miami, my summers fishing with Dad on Lake Lanier. She'd mock my gruffness, calling me El Gringo Silencioso, and I'd counter with terrible Spanish I'd picked up from YouTube, making her laugh until coffee sprayed from her nose. One evening, walking back from a team happy hour she'd dragged me to, she stopped under a gaslight on King Street, her breath visible in the cool air. "You're not broken, Mark," she said, soft but firm, "just bent, and I'm pretty good at fixing things." I wanted to argue, to tell her I was a lost cause, but her eyes held mine, and for the first time since Emily, I felt a flicker of something dangerous, hope, fragile and untested, blooming in the ruins of who I'd been. Falling for Isabella was like waking from a coma, slow, disorienting and terrifyingly alive. After that night on King Street, our orbit tightened, pulling us from cautious colleagues to something neither of us could name. It started with a real date, dinner at Husk, Charleston's pride. where she wore a green dress that made her eyes glow like emeralds, and I fumbled with my tie in the truck beforehand, nerves raw like a kid at prom. Over shrimp and grits, she laughed at my awful Spanish. You sound like a drunk cowboy. And I told her about the time I burned a Thanksgiving turkey, the smoke alarm serenading my failure. Her hand found mine under the table, steadying the tremor I hadn't noticed, and I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was feeling. We moved slow, both scarred from betrayal's shrapnel. She'd flinch at sudden moves, echoes of her ex's lies. I'd freeze when she got too close, Emily's voice still a ghost in my ear. But Isabella was patient, fierce in her gentleness, peeling back my layers with every late-night talk on her porch, Cuban coffee steaming between us. I don't do secrets, she said one night, her gaze piercing. If we're doing this, it's all in or nothing. I nodded, throat tight, and spilled it all. Emily's affair, the kids' rejection, the motel nights where I'd planned my escape. She listened, no pity, just a quiet fury that matched mine, then said, "You're enough, Mark. More than enough." It was the first time I believed it might be true. 6 months in, I proposed on Folly Beach at sunset, the sky bleeding orange and pink over the Atlantic. I'd carved a ring box from driftwood, rough, imperfect like me, holding a simple gold band with a tiny emerald, her birthstone. "Isabella Ortiz," I said, down on one knee, the sand cold under me. "You've dragged me back to life when I thought I was done. Marry me?" Her eyes welled up, but she grinned, yanking me up to kiss me hard, salt air and her perfume mixing in a way I'd never forget. "Sí, estúpido," she laughed. "But you're learning Spanish if we're doing this." The yes was all I needed. The rest was a bonus. We married in a small chapel off Meeting Street, just us, her parents from Miami, and a handful of co-workers who'd become friends. She wore white lace, simple and stunning, her curls loose, and I stood in a grey suit, heart pounding like it might break free. Our vows were raw, honest. "I promise to fight for us," I said, voice cracking, "to never let silence win." She echoed it, adding, "And to call you out when you're a stubborn ass." Laughter broke the tension, and when I kissed her, it wasn't just a seal, it was a rebirth. 9 months later, Sophia arrived, a squalling bundle with Isabella's curls and my stubborn chin, born in the chaos of a midnight storm. Holding her, I felt the past loosen its grip, Emily's shadow fading under the weight of this tiny, perfect life. Our home, a shotgun house in North Charleston, became a fortress of noise and love. Isabella taught me salsa in the kitchen, hips swaying to Celia Cruz, while Sophia giggled from her high chair. I learned Spanish, butchering verbs until Isabella's dad, a gruff mechanic, clapped my shoulder and said, "Good enough, hombre." We built something new, brick by brick. Open talks about fears, no locked phones, no late-night mysteries. One night, as Sophia slept and rain tapped the roof, Isabella curled into me on the couch. "This is us," she whispered, "not them." I kissed her forehead, feeling the man I'd been, broken, hollow, finally buried, replaced by a husband, a father, a survivor remade by love. The humid Savannah evening wrapped around me as I stood on the porch of our midtown house, Sophia's laughter echoing from the backyard where she chased Rico through the grass. It had been 5 years since I'd left Atlanta, 5 years since Lila and Ben turned their backs on me at that diner off I-20, their words, "We're fine without you," carved into my soul like a brand. I'd built a new life with Isabella and Sophia, a fortress of love and trust I guarded fiercely, but the ghosts of my first family never fully faded. They haunted me in quiet moments, the memory of Lila's first bike ride, Ben's gap-toothed grin at his first home run, bits of a past I'd buried but couldn't forget. That night, as I sipped a beer and watched the sun dip below the oaks, my phone rang, an unknown number flashing on the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something, instinct maybe, made me answer. "Dad?" The voice was soft, hesitant, but achingly familiar. My beer slipped from my hand, crashing onto the porch, the glass shattering like my composure. "Lila," I choked out, my heart slamming against my ribs. "Is that you?" A sob broke through the line and she whispered, "Yeah, it's me. I need to talk to you." 5 years of silence, 5 years of thinking they'd erased me, and now my daughter, my little girl, now 20, was calling. "Where are you?" I demanded, panic and hope warring in my chest. "I'm in Savannah," she said, voice trembling. "I found you on Sophia's preschool website. Your name's listed as emergency contact. I'm at a coffee shop downtown. Can you come?" I didn't hesitate. I yelled for Isabella, grabbed my keys and drove, the truck's tires screeching as I tore through the streets. The coffee shop was a dim hole in the wall off Broughton Street, the kind with mismatched chairs, and the smell of burnt espresso. Lila sat in the corner, her dark hair longer now, her face thinner, more like Emily's than I remembered. She stood when she saw me, her hazel eyes, my eyes, brimming with tears. "Dad," she said. And then she was in my arms, sobbing into my shirt, her body shaking like it had when she was 5 and scared of thunderstorms. I held her tight, my own tears soaking her hair, the years of pain and anger melting under the weight of her embrace. We sat, and she spilled it all. 5 years of hell she'd kept locked away. "Mom lied to us," she said, twisting a napkin. "Into shreds. After you left, she said you didn't want us, that you'd moved on. She brought guys home, lots of them. One night, when I was 16, she told me to be nice to one while she went out. He tried to—" She stopped, choking on the words, and my blood turned to ice, rage roaring through me like a freight train. "Ben came home, chased him off with a baseball bat. We were so scared, Dad." I gripped the table, knuckles white, fighting the urge to drive to Atlanta and tear Emily apart. "Why didn't you call me?" I rasped, guilt clawing at me. "We tried," she said, voice breaking. "That day at the diner, we yelled for you, but you didn't hear. Mom said you'd never come back." Ben was next. Lila called him from the shop, and an hour later he walked in, tall, broad, a 19-year-old man in an army jacket, his jaw set like mine. He froze when he saw me, then crossed the room in 3 strides and hugged me hard, his breath ragged against my shoulder. "I enlisted to get away from her," he said, pulling back, his eyes red. "She's a monster, Dad. I'm sorry we believed her. We talked until midnight about the lies the years apart, the wounds Emily carved into them. They'd tracked me down, desperate to rebuild what we'd lost. When I brought them home, Isabella welcomed them like they were hers, Sophia tackling Ben with a squeal. 'Are you my brother?' He laughed, lifting her up, and said, 'Yeah, kid, I am.' That night, lying awake beside Isabella, I felt the pieces of my shattered life shift, Lila and Ben back, not as kids I'd lost, but as adults choosing me. 'You did good, Mark,' Isabella whispered, her hand on my chest. 'They're home.' I nodded, tears burning, and swore I'd never let them go again. Not to Emily, not to anyone. This was my family, fractured but fighting, and I'd die before I lost it a second time. The kitchen light flickered as I sat at the table, a half-empty bottle of bourbon beside me, the amber liquid glinting in the dimness of our Savannah home. It was 2 weeks after Lila and Ben's return, 2 weeks of uneasy joy as we stitched, our family back together, awkward dinners, late-night talks, Sophia's endless questions about her big brother and sister. But that night, Lila asked to speak alone, her voice tight, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. Isabella took Sophia to bed, leaving us in the quiet, the air thick with something heavy, something I wasn't sure I wanted to face. "There's more, Dad," Lila said, sitting across from me, her hazel eyes avoiding mine. "Stuff I didn't tell you at the coffee shop, it's bad." I poured another shot, the burn steadying my nerves, and nodded. "Go on." She took a shaky breath, her fingers twisting into knots. "After you left, Mum didn't just lie about you, she got worse. When I was 17, she started dating this guy, Travis, older, maybe 40, with a temper. She'd bring him home, let him crash on the couch, drink our grocery money away. One night she told me to keep him company while she ran to the store." My stomach dropped, a cold dread pooling inside me, but I stayed silent, letting her words spill. "He got drunk, cornered me in the living room, said I owed him for all the nice things Mom got from him. I locked myself in my room, but he He kicked the door, screaming I was a tease that he'd get in one way or another. The glass cracked in my hand, bourbon dripping onto the table, my vision blurring with rage. Did he... I couldn't. Finish? The question a jagged shard in my throat. Lila shook her head, tears streaming. No. Ben came home from practice, saw what was happening. He grabbed Dad's old bat, the one you kept in the garage, and told Travis he'd kill him if he didn't leave. Travis ran, but Mom came back furious, blamed us for ruining her night. She said we were ungrateful, that we drove you away, and now her too. I slammed the table, the crack echoing, my voice a growl. She put you in danger? My daughter? Lila flinched but nodded, whispering, That's not the worst. She pulled out her phone, hands trembling, and showed me a photo. A blurry shot of Emily, hollow-eyed and thin, standing with a man I didn't recognize outside a rundown trailer. This was last year, Lila said. She's on drugs now. Dad? Meth, I think. Ben found her like that when he was on leave. She begged him for money, said she'd tell us you were dead if he didn't pay. He gave her what he had to make her stop, but she's gone, Dad, not the mom we knew. The room spun, my chest heaving. The woman I'd loved for 16 years reduced to a junkie blackmailing her own son. I stood, pacing, fists clenched, every muscle screaming to hunt her down, to make her pay for what she'd done to them. Dad, there's one more thing, Lila said, her voice barely audible. After Travis, she tried it again, with Ben, told him to entertain some woman she owed money to. He was 15. He ran away that night, slept in a park till morning. That's when he decided to enlist. I roared, kicking a chair across the room, the crash rattling the walls. She turned my son into a bargaining chip? My voice broke. Tears I couldn't stop streaming down my face. Lila stood, grabbing my arm. We survived her, Dad. But I need you to promise. We're done with her. She doesn't get to hurt us anymore. I pulled her into me, holding her like she'd break, the fury and grief a storm inside me. That night I made a vow, not just to Lila, but to Ben, to Sophia, to Isabella, to myself. Emily was dead to us, a spectre I'd shield them from with every breath I had left. I'd failed them once, walking away deaf to their cries at that diner. Never again. She'd taken my kids' innocence, turned their home into a battlefield, but she wouldn't take their future. I'd stand between her and them, a wall she'd never breach, and God help her if she tried. The oak trees cast long shadows over our new 2-story house in Savannah's Ardsley Park, the late summer sun painting the porch gold as I hammered the last nail into a swing Isabella had insisted on. It had been a year since Lila and Ben came. Back, a year of rebuilding. Trust, love, a family I'd thought was lost forever. The house was bigger than our old midtown fixer-upper, with a guest room for Ben's visits from Fort Stewart, where he'd stationed after basic training, and a sunny corner room Lila claimed when she moved in, taking classes at Savannah State. Sophia, now 6, ruled the backyard, her laughter a constant soundtrack as she raced Rico around a tire swing we'd hung from a sturdy branch. This wasn't just a house. It was a home, a sanctuary stitched together from the ashes of my past and the hope of my present. Isabella orchestrated it all, her warmth pulling us into orbit. She'd welcomed Lila and Ben without hesitation, cooking arroz con pollo for their first dinner, teaching Sophia to call them hermana and hermano. Lila took to her instantly, the two of them swapping stories over coffee, while Ben, quieter, guarded, softened under her teasing, letting her drag him into card games with Sophia. "You're stuck with us now," Isabella told them one night, her grin fierce, and I saw the relief in their eyes, the hunger for a mother who wouldn't break them. We'd bought them a car, a used Toyota Camry, after Ben's beat-up Honda died, slipping the keys into Lila's hand with a note. For coming home. "Love, Dad and Isabella," she'd cried, hugging us both, and Ben clapped my shoulder, muttering, "Thanks, Dad, means a lot." Christmas that year was chaos, beautiful, loud chaos. My parents drove down from Macon, their old Buick loaded, with gifts. Mom fussing over Sophia's braids while Dad grilled ribs in the backyard. Isabella's family came too, her mom, Dad, and cousin Rosa, piling the table with pastels and coquito, their voices a symphony of Spanish and laughter. Lila and Ben fit right in, Ben helping Dad with the grill, Lila braiding Rosa's hair while Sophia danced between them, demanding Tia Rosa spin her. I stood on the porch, beer in hand, watching my two worlds collide, my past with Emily, fading into a distant echo, drowned out by this messy, perfect present. "You okay?" Isabella asked, slipping beside me, her pregnant belly just starting to show. I nodded, pulling her close. Never thought I'd have this. The next spring, Isabella gave birth to Matteo, a boy with her dark eyes and my stubborn streak, born in the same hospital where Sophia arrived. Holding him, I felt the weight of 4 kids, Lila, Ben, Sophia, Matteo, a family I'd fought for, lost, and fought for again. Ben came home on leave for the baptism, standing as godfather. In his dress uniform, his jaw tight with pride. Lila, now a junior, designed the invitations, her art degree shining through in every flourish. Sophia, ever the big sister, bossed everyone around, insisting Matteo wear the tiny socks she'd picked. We celebrated in the backyard, the air thick, with barbecue smoke and music, Garth Brooks for me, salsa for Isabella, our blended clans sprawling across the lawn like it had always been this way. One night, as I tucked Sophia in, she asked, "Daddy, are we all one family now?" I kissed her forehead, throat tight. "Yeah, baby girl, we are." Downstairs, Lila and Ben were sprawled on the couch, arguing over a movie, while Isabella rocked Matteo in the kitchen, humming a bolero. I stood in the doorway watching them. My daughter who'd survived hell, my son who'd fought his way back, my wife who'd saved me, my kids who'd made me whole. Emily's shadow lingered, a scar we'd all bear, but it couldn't touch. This? We'd built something stronger, something real, and I'd spend every damn day making sure it lasted. The backyard of our Ardsley Park home glowed under string lights, the hum of cicadas blending with the chatter of 24 voices as we celebrated Lila's college graduation. It was May, 7 years since I'd walked out of that Atlanta house. 7 years since Emily's betrayal shattered my world. Now at 45, I stood beside the grill, flipping burgers, watching a life I'd never dared dream of unfold. Lila, 22, radiant in her cap and gown, laughed with Ben, 21, home from Fort Stewart, over a game of cornhole. Sophia, 7, darted between guests, her pigtails bouncing, while Matteo, 2, toddled after her, clutching a toy. Truck? Isabella, pregnant again, her third with me, swayed to a salsa beat from the portable speaker, her laughter ringing as she danced with Rosa. My parents were there, older now, Mom snapping photos, Dad sneaking Matteo extra cookies. Isabella's family filled the space too, her parents, siblings, cousins, a loud, loving chaos of Spanglish and hugs. Ben's fiancée, Mia, a nurse he'd met at a base event, helped Lila cut the cake, her shy smile a perfect match for his quiet strength. The air smelled of charcoal and magnolias, the night warm and alive, a tapestry of everything I'd fought to reclaim. 7 years ago I'd been a broken man, staring at a motel ceiling convinced love was a lie. Now I had this, a family not just rebuilt, but expanded, a testament to resilience, to second chances. Emily crashed the edges of my mind sometimes, her faint spectre of the past. Lila and Ben had cut her off completely after moving to Savannah. No calls, no visits, nothing. Last I'd heard through a mutual friend, she'd OD'd in a halfway house outside Atlanta, barely clinging to life. I didn't feel satisfaction, just a dull ache for the woman she'd been, the mother my kids deserved but never had. They'd healed without her, Lila with her art, Ben with his service and Mia, and I'd made damn sure they'd never face her chaos again. That night, as fireworks popped over the neighborhood, Lila pulled me aside, her diploma in hand. "Dad, I got into grad school, SCAD, full ride," she said, eyes shining. I hugged her, pride swelling, and whispered, "I always knew you'd make it." Later, Ben found me by the grill, Mia at his side. "We set a date, next June," he said, his voice steady, a man now, not the scared boy who'd run from Emily. "Want you to walk her down the aisle with me." I nodded, throat tight, the honor hitting deep. Isabella joined us, Matteo on her hip, and wrapped an arm around me. "Told you we'd get here," she murmured, her dark eyes warm. The party stretched into the night, laughter, music, stories, until the kids crashed on blankets under the stars, Sophia curled against Lila, Matteo in Ben's lap. I stood with Isabella watching them, the weight of 7 years lifting like smoke. This was my ending, not perfect, not without scars, but whole. Emily's betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but it didn't win. I'd walked away, rebuilt, found. Isabella brought my kids home and grown a family stronger than the one I'd lost. "Any regrets?" Isabella asked, echoing a question from years back, her head on my shoulder. I kissed her temple, smiling. "Not a damn one. Every step brought me here." She squeezed my hand and we said it together, a mantra that held us through it all. Family is everything. The cicadas sang on, the lights twinkled, and I knew, beyond the pain, beyond the fight, this was where I was meant to be, surrounded by love I'd earned, a life I'd made mine.